Welcome everyone to the Autoimmune Hour. I'm Sharon Sayler from SharonSayler.com. And oh my goodness, it's been one of those days. So welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have here. We have Linda Ross Vega and Gary Jordan here. They're the authors of the wonderful book called Unlock the Power of Your Perception, Claim Your Natural Strengths, Reframe Your Weaknesses, Reshape Your Most Important Relationships. And it's all about perception. And I think it's really important for all of us to understand about perception, especially if we have a diagnosis. Welcome, Linda. Welcome, Gary. Thanks for being on the show.
Well, thanks for having us.
Now, I loved your book. I found it fascinating. And one of the things about perception for me was as I was reading the book, I changed what I thought the word meant. I came into it thinking it meant something very differently. And as I read through the book, I was pleasantly surprised at, oh, this is what perception really is. And I didn't realize it was such a, I guess it to me, perception was more of a intuition kind of thing in my head. I don't know why I thought that, but let's talk about giving your guys' definition of perception because I love the way you frame it.
Well, where it begins is with sensation. You take in information you receive sensation from your five senses, but it doesn't mean anything until your brain makes meaning out of that. And it's the meaning making of the sensation that is perception. And what we're saying is that there are different ways that people do that with a natural filter. And those are the 6 different perceptual styles.
Linda, what would you like to add?
So we also have a little depth in perception, is what we like to say, in the fact that we say it's a 3-step process. So the sensation comes in through your 5 senses. So taste, touch, smell, visual, and hearing. Research will tell you that given that you have all 5 senses, if you have all 5 senses, 75% of your input comes from sight, 20 from hearing, and taste, touch, and smell round it out. But all of that comes in as raw data. And so your brain has to process that to make meaning out of it, or we'd all be stuck in constant overwhelm. So our perceptual style filter helps us make meaning of all that raw data. But then there's one more step, and that's life experience. Our brain then says, okay, data, here's the meaning. Was that true for me before? Okay, that's a yes. Is this brand new? Let me put a placeholder there. It's that type of thing. Personal validation of what you just thought. Those 3 things happen in a blink of an eye. And that's how we make meaning of the world around us. And based on that meaning, it influences how we take action. So that's why perception is so incredibly important in all the things that we do.
And what fascinated me about the book is I thought perception was, I'll say, more static than that. And then as it began to explain why in my family, it made sense that each one of my siblings, if you talk to them about our childhood, grew up in entirely different families.
That's really common. We believe perceptual style is innate. So that means you were born with it. You didn't inherit it. So I think there's something like statistically a 64% chance that you will not have the same style as either one of your parents. And then if you have multiple siblings, there's probably a really good chance you have several styles represented in your family, which means everybody has a different way of seeing things and what was important to them. I've had the same experience with my siblings. My sister will be talking about something and go, was that the same? Was that the same day? Was that the same thing? Because I got one thing out of it and she got a totally different thing out of it.
Exactly. And that's what I find so fascinating. I am curious, though, about so you say it's innate. Have you found any part that I'll say the culture that we're born into or raised in or the greater community plays into how we perceive things as well?
There's definitely developmental influences in all of our lives. How you take the information in is a perceptual style. How you make meaning of it is a perceptual style, but that's influenced by the developmental experiences you've had, parents, teachers, important adults in your life, caregivers, in the way they impact you and what they reward and what they don't reward. And there's sometimes when parents or other people will push a certain style so that the person comes out with a combination, if you will, of both perceptual style and development that creates a unique flavor for each person.
Wow.
We've done a couple of research studies over the years We first developed this style back in the 1980s when we were both like small children. I just aged both of us immediately. But we've done several studies since then, and we've found an equal distribution. There doesn't seem to be any difference between race, gender, culture. It's fascinating. It's just like 1/6 of the world is each one of the styles. That's what our research has shown so far.
Well, that's
But
amazing.
We have translated it into Spanish, French, and Japanese, and we get the same results. You almost think we faked the data. It's so consistent across cultures.
Wow. Let's talk about the 6 styles. What's the first one? Because I think that'll help explain some of this amazing science that we're talking about.
We always present them in alphabetical order. The first style is activity. And these are people who are experiential. They see the world as a constant changing kaleidoscope of experiences to be had and shared with other people because they're so amazing. You've got to experience what I'd experienced. Said that they've never met a stranger in their life. They're the people that talk to you and strike up conversations in the grocery line about nothing in particular and just feel really excited that they shared something with somebody. They tell stories and anecdotes all the time. They have a kind of a natural, I don't want to say they're not salesmen per se, although many salesmen are activity people, but they're very persuasive in the excitements they bring to what they describe and what they tell you about.
So funny. A couple of people popped right into my mind. Okay, check, check.
okay, our second one would be adjustments. And these folks see a world that's very complex, how everything is interrelated, people to systems to environments, that everything is somehow interrelated and has multiple ripple effects. They're natural observers of life and like to look at things rationally and logically. They're fascinated by information and they enjoy learning and sharing that information. They're natural diplomats and understand protocol without formal training. And they're also natural mediators. And part of that is that often when you talk to adjustments people, they go, if everyone had the right information, the decisions would be easy. There wouldn't be a disconnect. So we just need to make sure everybody has all the information that they need. So then the decisions become obvious.
This is my own style perceiving this, but I could see where that style, where they're making adjustments, could be perceived from someone else that maybe from the activity center as not set, fluid. I'm just thinking where they're making adjustments for everything.
There is that. They like to refine and perfect. They like processes that are reliable and efficient, and they'll redesign things in order to make that happen. And they're careful observers. So they're not quick decision makers because they do their research. But once they've made a decision, they own it. They live with that. So they're not like wishy washy in any way, but they may say, give me a minute. An activity person made a decision just that moment. And they'll go, give me a moment here. I'm going to do a little thinking about this and then I'll come back with a decision I like.
Mm. And I can see how those two, the activity and the adjustment, could probably bump heads in a committee.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, what's the third one?
The third style is flow. And flow people are natural. They read the natural rhythms of life very well. They align with the flow of life and they see it moving very smoothly. And the problems come when people try to buck that flow or get in the way of that flow. They're also wonderful at creating communities and groups, and they are the ones that provide the glue that hold groups and organizations together. They're the ones that take care of all those logistical things that need to be taken care of. And they do it very unobtrusively with very little fanfare. But they bring people in around common beliefs, common values, and they build those communities and sustain them around those common values and beliefs.
Wow. Now, with my own perception, I have to be careful of which ones suck me in. I'm trying to stay neutral here, and I'm like, okay, that sounds like a cool person.
It is. Another thing about flow that I think is important to mention is that they're naturally empathetic. They're great listeners. And part of this has to do with they're very people and community oriented. And so people often seek them out in times of trouble or turbulence or just disconnects and look to them to listen and be sounding boards for them. And so, interestingly enough, for flow people, they're so naturally good at doing that, they sometimes forget to set boundaries for themselves. There's only so much listening one should have to do on a given day. And so,
Right.
boundary setting can be a challenge.
The description you gave, I can understand how that would be a challenge for someone with the flow. So, wow, this is fascinating. Now, I'm just curious. We've only touched the first three: activity, adjustment, and flow. As you grow older and get more experience in life, I can see where maybe you start to adapt and adopt little bits and pieces, like the activity person. Gary mentioned sales and that kind of thing. And I'm thinking, wow, I might want to adopt that skill. How does that change our perception, or can we change it, or are we just adding a skill?
What happens is it's like reading it. If you go and buy the latest sales book, okay, the person is teaching you what they recognize that they do, but they're not teaching you the stuff that they're not aware that they're doing when they're selling. And the more than likely than not, that salesperson is using natural skills that they're not even aware that they're using. And so that they identify, if you do this and this, you can have the kind of sales success that I have. And some of those things will work for you, but if it's not from your natural skill set, they'll be acquired skills. And you can acquire skills. Acquired skills don't make any statement about the quality of how you perform the skill. It has a statement about how difficult it is for you to do that, how much effort you have to put into it, and how much it will wear you out psychologically and emotionally and physically if you continue to try to do that skill exclusively rather than those that come naturally to you.
So, we all develop acquired skills in our lives. You can't live your life just doing what you do naturally. We all have things that are expected of us, or life happens and we're the only one around and we need to learn how to do it. And so we don't discourage that. What we do say is try and focus on what you do naturally. There's so much there that you take for granted. All of us do that. When we do something naturally well, we have a tendency to assume everybody can. And that's so far from the truth, right? So we just assume everybody can. So we don't give it any value. And we don't realize that's some of our secret sauce. If you understand what you do naturally well and what your style is and what your potential is, then you can look at these acquired skills and say, I want to keep this one because it adds value. And oh, isn't it nice? I don't have to do that other one anymore because I'm really not interested in doing it that way. I'd rather do it this other way.
Well, you know what I was thinking about as you talked about this? I know a few people where I've asked them for help. I really like how you do this or that. And oftentimes they really don't know. It's almost as if they start talking to me, telling me how to do it, but they're three-quarters of the way through the instruction manual. They forget to tell me you have to turn on the machine.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's the things you take for granted. And we all tend to take what we do well for granted. That it's just out and we assume everybody else can. So
I know in my younger years, I was a little less tolerant and I would find myself getting frustrated. It's so obvious, but
yes,
obviously it's not so
exactly.
obvious, right?
Exactly. So that's the
Well,
problem.
it is obvious to you, but it's not to the person you're telling it.
Yes, I've discovered that over my many years, but I remember in younger where I just get frustrated with like, why can't you see it or hear it or do it or whatever it is? But
Exactly.
so we've talked about activity, adjustment, and flow. Let's talk about the fourth one.
The fourth one is goals. So these are the folks who see the world as challenges and problems, things that need to be stepped up into and solved and resolved. They are incredibly good at creating structure out of chaos. They're decisive. They're forward motion oriented. They enjoy fixing problems. They like doing triage and analyzing things to get an answer and make it happen and move. They are naturally competitive, not in a bad sense, but they see the world as you need to engage. And if you're going to do it to win, as opposed to just not play at all. and they believe in preparedness. So I would say the Boy Scout motto of always be prepared sounds like a goals motto. A lot of leadership training that you can investigate or books you can read are given from a goals voice of how to be directive, how to make things happen, how to rally people together. Very much part of their bailiwick.
I know a few of those too. And I find it fascinating in several business styles or businesses I know. Some of the first questions you get asked are like, what are your goals? Where are you going with?
Exactly. What are you doing? What's your 3-month plan, 18-month plan, 5-year plan? I will tell you that many of the business writing courses that I took or was involved with over the years in corporate America are written from a goals voice, which is basically state the problem, give the 3 things you want considered, and go and put all of the information and context at the end. So if somebody wants to know all that, they'll go read it. But goals people can be patient listeners because they're listening for what's the problem? Let's think of solutions.
Is it difficult for some of the other styles though that to understand each other? As you said, a lot of leadership books are written in the goals format. And I'm thinking coaching is all about what's your goal, what's the obstacle, what's the
Right.
opportunity, how are you going to get it done? So is there a deficit with the others are able to keep up with that kind of style? I'm just trying to figure out whether I've got somebody who's just goals oriented. And if I'm reading books by goals people, but it's not my natural style, are there things I can do to adapt or alleviate? I'm seeing a lot of tension build up in my own self when I read just a goals oriented book.
The answer is like a multifaceted layered. Yes, there are natural tensions. Yes, there are things you can do to take what's being said in that voice and make it your own so that it works for you and your style. A lot of it is learning the difference between the content you want to absorb and mimicry. So you don't want to mimic the way they do it, it'll wear you out. If you're not that style, it's just going to wear you out to do that. But the essence of what they're doing, what the end result is, you can incorporate that and get there your own way. So what we see with stylistic differences between the different styles is a lot of times it's not about the what needs to be done, what the end objective is, or yes, it's nice to set goals, but it's the how I'm going to go about doing that and how I'm going to go about getting them done. And that's where the real magic is in doing it your way. And that's aligned with how you see the world as opposed to trying to emulate how someone else is doing it. There are different relationships between the different styles, and all of them have challenges, but all of them have really beneficial synergies as well.
It's becoming very clear on how important it is to understand perception styles. I want to get into the final two perception styles and then not forget to mention wow, I can see how if I, as the person with the autoimmune diagnosis, and we always call them here thrivers, and my medical professional is talking very different styles, I can see how, boy, getting the care and the goals oriented, all of that in the same direction could be very difficult. Let's finish up with the final two. We have activity, adjustment, flow, and goals. What are the final two perception styles? And then we'll talk a little bit how we all played it nice together.
The fifth style is we call methods. And these methods, the stereotype we use is that from Dragnet, just the facts, ma'am, just the facts.
Oh,
Because methods people are all about the facts. They believe that if I understand the facts of the situation, then I understand the situation. If I don't have the facts, then I don't understand the situation. They're rational, they're matter of fact, they're logical. They like to create methodologies. That's why we named them methods, in which you do A, B, and C and you get D. And it happens every time that way. Every time you do A, B, and C, you get D. They like that kind of predictability. They like that kind of productivity that comes from a methodology that works. We always say that the methods people think that when a methodology doesn't work, it's not because the methodology was incorrect, it's because the person didn't do it correctly.
I
There's
actually know someone like that, and I guess I have to give him a little more grace and space. Okay.
one of the things is they know that even the most complex thing can be broken down into simple steps. And for them, there's fun in doing that. So how can we break this
Absolutely.
down so that it's achievable every time by multiple people? And they're also, I tease my friends who are methods that, and I am not, that they're professional list builders. I make a list and then I forget where I put it. They make lists that are like reusable because they're reliable and they have everything they need on them. So
I imagine they make good program managers or product developer t
most definitely.
pers
Exactly.
And the final one
Is vision. So our vision folks see the world as endless possibility and opportunity. They're the people who are very future oriented, like they have an idea of something and it's out there and they'll define it as they go. They tend to rely on their intuition a lot. It's not unusual to hear them say, I just have a gut feel about this or that. They can be very persuasive. They love making impact, having influence, inspiring other people to action. And we find that there are a lot of vision people who enjoy being entrepreneurs because they will take risks that the other styles think, oh my goodness, why would you do that? But a vision person will go, nothing ventured, nothing gained. And if you have a failure, you just pick yourself up and move on. Life lesson. Okay. So they don't dwell in what the mistakes. They just take the piece that they need to know and move forward. Again, very future oriented, where they're going. The poster children for optimism, because there's always a possibility. There's always an opportunity. There's always something to figure out. They tend to have a lot of self confidence because of that reliance on their intuition.
Wow, this is fascinating. And now I've seen this and heard the 6 styles, and I'm curious as we're talking about in wellness, I know that some of my biggest challenges have been getting different styles or different people, shall I say, to listen to me. So I want to talk about this idea of how do we talk to each other when we're different styles. Do you have any tips on uh, bobbing and weaving and adapting? And when maybe in your own mind you're like, oh, okay, this lots of stories, lots of maybe what I might title the activity person. My first thought was a bit of an extrovert, and maybe that's not me. So how do I make sure I'm getting the most from my medical professionals?
The first place you start is understanding yourself. That's where we always start. The manual, you can see it over Linda Ross's right shoulder. It's called Celebrate You. And there's 6 different versions of it that really describe each of the 6 perceptual styles in great depth and begin to talk about what is your preferred communication style? What kind of words do you use? What kind of concepts do you use? And then you can familiarize yourself with the way that the other 6 do it. And it becomes not how to force them to understand you, but how do you use your understanding and knowledge of their differences to understand them and have them feel heard more effectively. Because when people feel heard, they're more willing to listen.
I almost feel like it's me learning French or Spanish or Italian
Yes.
kind of
Yeah.
idea. It's not that I'm changing them. In my mind, I'm doing this calculation. Okay, they sound maybe more like a flow person. So it's time to try and talk a little bit of flow.
That's exactly what we do. So the 6 styles have a relationship to each other. So if you picture a circle, every style has a piece of that circle. So 1/6 of the pie, so to speak. So each style has 2 styles next to them and one opposite of them and 2 that aren't either opposite or next to them. And so we call those relationships like neighbors, opposite and one off. And there are really easy tips and techniques to learn that help you listen for where you will see commonalities, where you will see differences. There's a whole thing about communication you can do, but honestly, we tend to listen with the filter of our perceptual style and we deliver information with the filter of our perceptual style. If we understand our own and understand some key words that would represent the other styles, like Gary said, it allows you to refine your message, right? Ah, this person is looking for key points. Ah, this person is looking for more context. Ah, this person wants to understand personal value on this. But it's not like you have to analyze it. It's just you start listening for speech usage and tonality. Just you get a feel for it after a while. I know it sounds like a lot when I say it. I hear it in my head as, "Ooh, that's a lot of stuff," but it's actually really easy to pick up.
Now, I do a lot of that in my own work and in my other career where I do communications work. So, innate part of me and a lot of years of training where I'm able to pick up other fascinated. That's one part I was so fascinated by the perceptual styles is just, and that just adds another delicious layer for me to listen for. Okay. And oftentimes when I'm doing it on the fly, the one thing I listen for is I like to say, are they community driven or are they productivity driven? That's a real quick one for me to just
Yeah.
I don't have enough information to know anything else than that, but are they really about the community wanting to know me and that know that I have a dog and where I live and all that? Or they're like, just you're just the facts person.
Yes,
Mhm.
exactly.
Exactly.
That's a good delineation for a quick one. And another quick one can be, are they decision motivated or are they information motivated? It's like they're listening in a hurry to make a decision about what you're saying, or are they sitting back and just waiting for you to give them all the information? So that's a good telltale sign as well.
Another favorite of telltale sign I listen for is if it's future oriented, goal oriented, like over there. Maybe they're even gesturing out away from the or if
Yes.
it's an away from, like, the language is more about, "I'm not going back there, never doing that again," kinds of things. I listen for those types of things too, because I know it's very difficult to talk to someone who is away from, "I'm not going back there again," to talk about, "So what do you want?" It's not a fair question.
No, it isn't, because sometimes people are moving forward to avoid what was behind them. And that's a totally different approach than moving forward because they're curious about what's next. I think that's a great delineation that you're using there.
Share a little bit more in the time we have left. What else about the book and all of your years of research would you like to share with the audience that I haven't yet asked?
Wow.
I know going back over decades of research that
Yeah. Yeah, really. You just got us. We're very rarely stumped because we can talk about this forever. Let's see.
What I would like to emphasize is that there's 6 different perceptual styles. So with being there being 6, that means that only 16% of the rest of the world sees the world the way you do. And that,
wow, no,
often
I want to stop there just for a second, Gary. We should have started with that because that really blew me away there. That
okay.
sets a lot of things into perspective of why we have a lot of difficulty communicating with people. So go ahead, finish that up. But I just had to take a breath there. That
You
put
bet.
it all into context.
So again, only 16% of the world sees the world the way you do. So there's a lot of opportunity to feel out of place, to feel bad about the way you see the world, to feel a lack of validation for your viewpoint, and for a lot of miscommunication and conflict with other people. And so that what we have seen and learned, and I think is to me one of the most exciting aspects of this, all that we do with it, is that when people can get that sense of, wow, you mean the way I've always known I've seen the world, because that's what we say. We don't tell you anything you don't already know. We just put language on what you have not had language for. It's really okay to see within the world this way, the way I've always seen it. There's nothing wrong with me. And that feels good. People get excited when they discover their perceptual style and they start reading about it and they see that we're telling them that the way they communicate, that this way, that fits with this. This is the way that you, and they're going, yeah, yeah. And then, of course, Linda Ross mentioned this a little earlier, but that then it opens up the opportunity to offer the same grace that you've just given yourself to the other 5/6 of the world, that they are not wrong. They're just different in the way that they see things. And it's a new perspective that can be valuable to you, not a threat. And I think that's the biggest thing for me that we have created down in our research and discovered how that works.
I agree. And I think the other thing is that we stress strength because we believe that's where you start. When you go back to Gary's point that only 16% of the world sees the world the same way you do, Some of us are lucky enough to have a few of those people in our lives, but more often than not, we're dealing with the other 84%, right? And so we've had a lot of input in our lives from school systems to HR, employee systems that tell you what you aren't doing well and what you should go learn more of. And we don't spend a lot of time saying what you do well. So we like to say, take a moment and reground yourself into what you do naturally and take a moment, feel validated, understand that. Because once you feel good about that again, what you think you're missing gets a different perspective. And it's easier to appreciate differences in other people and think, oh my goodness, isn't it nice if there's someone who actually wants to do that? Because I don't. And so that's really lovely. Or he or she wasn't just purposely pushing my button. They really aren't getting it. Okay, let me back up a second and restate what I'd like them to understand. And so I think first is standing in your own strength and realizing that how you see the world is right and it's right for you and it's perfect for you. And that's great. And you have all this potential that honestly, you probably need an extra lifetime in order to capitalize on all of it. So there's all that's very positive. And these other things, if you need them, then it's an acquired strength. Learn it, bring it into your toolkit, but don't base your life on acquired skills. Base your life on what you do naturally.
I love that. Part of me is getting a yeah, but I want to go back to things like either the medical professionals or actually even as far back as family. I feel like graciously trying to educate everyone, like, I am this perceptual style and it's okay. Sometimes the other people try to fit you into their boxes and feeling okay about that can be really difficult.
One of the truths is that you can't make other people do anything. You can only manage yourself. And so understanding yourself, sometimes being in certain groups with this knowledge makes it, you have to do all the work. I have a saying that he or she who has a greater psychological awareness carries the burden for making the relationship work. And so that understanding your perceptual style does, and within a group of people that don't understand theirs or yours, does put you in the place where either I have to work to make all this work, or I just have to let things go and let the chips fly.
I think it's an advantage sometimes when you go here that you don't appreciate or you wish I would do it differently, but this is what's comfortable for me. Let's talk about what you think is missing. Is this about how I'm doing? So you can take the conversation and the disconnect or the criticism to a different level to discuss it and make it what it is. But it's feeling confident that the way you're doing it is comfortable for you. Do you have something else that you'd like me to do differently? And is there a value to that? It opens the conversation as opposed to, I hate the way you're doing that. And then you take that to heart and go do something that makes you miserable. But yeah, it's not like you wear a badge and everybody understands.
Under your name tag, there's
Exactly. Treat me this way. But it does give
Only
you
in the
awareness
seminar.
of perspective. Exactly. Exactly.
I know, Gary, you said only in a seminar, but maybe we should just all start walking around with a name tag on there. I'm goals, I'm flow.
It
Exactly.
would help.
Make life easier.
So, where do you guys see your research going? You've been doing it for quite a while now, and the book is awesome. Where would you like to see this research go?
I'll give away my perceptual style. The future is unlimited. We were like most people, we've been doing our work with perceptual style and our coaching business for 30 some years now, 30 plus years, and we enjoy it. And the pandemic gave us a chance to write the book we always were told we needed to have. So we're glad we did that. But honestly, it's just having people take advantage of understanding their perceptual style and using it as a tool to maybe lessen the disconnects and maybe hopefully patch some of the fissures that we create in with disconnects and not hearing each other. So I guess would love for it to become popular in the sense that people use it to enrich their lives. I don't know. Is that too Pollyanna?
No, it's lovely. You've
Love
got
it.
me thinking about one of the first medical professionals got to see, and I was built up in my mind that they were an expert, blah, blah, blah. I was very lucky to get an appointment with this person. And the reason I started this show was because of that person. I remember saying to myself, with all of my communication training and background, I could not. There was just a total disconnect in the way we viewed what my wellness. It wasn't like his view was wrong. It just wasn't going to work for me. And I would come home and I'd say to family members, wow, even with all my training, this person just won't listen to me. I
No.
feel like it's just imagine if I'd had a greater understanding of the perception style going on, I might have been able to make it work. But then again, I know, Linda Ross, you mentioned boundaries. I got to a point where I just set a boundary and we fired each other on the same day.
Exactly. And that's sometimes that's exactly the right thing to do. You just don't need toxic or traumatic relationships. I guess I like to believe that it gives us the grace to make good choices for
Absolutely.
ourselves and for other people. And that is comforting to be able to feel like you can make a good choice.
And one of those good choices, as you said, maybe it was traumatic for them in the moment. I don't think so. I think it was a pretty mutual, this isn't working. But I just know that it was the right thing to do because here, 8 years later, I have a fantastic medical team that I wouldn't have had if I had stayed on that other path. So
Exactly.
I know Gary has to drop off early, but I want to make sure that any final thoughts from you, Gary, and then we'll have about 5 more minutes of our interview.
No, I think that we've covered lots of great ground. It's been a joy to be here and talk about this with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing, everyone. And I want Linda Ross, if you still have another 5 minutes, I'd love to just cover a few more
Sure.
things.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you, Gary. So I'm really fascinated by the book, and I wanted to delve into ways that we can use it talking to people about our visions of wellness. I can see these different perceptual styles would have different ways of achieving wellness, well being, and
Sure.
how we can talk to other people, especially in the medical professional. I don't have a real clear question except other than I just can see how many times this has probably stunted my ability to get the care that I thought I should have.
I think it's a great question because it is like layers of questions. But yes, I would go back to the what we want. We're two people with two different styles. The what we want is the same. The how we go about getting it is different. And it's one style needs a lot more context. And so when you're talking to your medical professional, you don't want to just thank you for sharing that, but why are we going to do that? And you can have some people because they're not context related. It's don't you trust me? No, it's I'm trying to get an understanding. And so it's the value of using styles is to know what you personally need to feel comfortable about how you're going about something. And also some techniques about how that might be different from other people. And therefore, some things that you might need to do in order to get what you need, not ever settle for less.
I love that because I'm thinking that if I'm talking to a medical professional and I'm not getting what I need, I could see myself just pulling out. I recently read this wonderful book about unlocking the power of perception. And I found out that for me, this is the things I really need to feel comfortable
Exactly.
and not like throwing that out there, but hoping that once I explained what I need, the other person would be able to adapt their style to, oh, okay.
Exactly. And I think the other thing too that happens to many of us when we're dealing with illnesses, especially, is that we're looking for advice, we're looking for expertise, we're looking for understanding. And sometimes that's way too much to ask for one person to give us.
Nice that you bring that up because one thing that I joke about, especially when I find someone who gives me an answer that was helpful in my own hearing and perception, and I have an aha light bulb moment, it's like somehow I just feel like my sanity's been confirmed.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I always say sometimes it's easier. I don't always say that, but I'm thinking out loud, talking and thinking at the same time is sometimes dangerous for me. But it's the level setting the expectation from this particular medical professional. I need this information. And then I need a who can give me this information. And then if they say, "Oh, I can do both for you," hot diggity. But sometimes they really appreciate that because they're focused on one aspect of the total wellness program. So I'd say part of it is expectation, but the other part of it is being your own best advocate. And it's so easy to be overwhelmed by professionals of any profession. The assumption is they know more than I do. So my goodness, let me listen to what they're saying. But when you understand what's important for you based on how you perceive the world and how you make meaning, then it allows you to ask. I would say it doesn't allow you to ask, but it encourages you to ask the type of questions to get the information you want
Mhm.
and need. I think until you understand the value for yourself, it can sometimes feel stressful to do that because you're hoping they'll just read your mind and tell you the things that you need to know. After all, they've gone through this with other people before. They should have all my stuff, but each one of us is unique because our life experience to this point has taught us one thing or another. And then our perception. So it's added on to our perceptions. I love the idea of saying, wow, I'm just, I'm still concerned about these things. And I just learned a little bit about how my brain works. And could I ask you these 6 more questions? How disarming can that be? That's brilliant.
One of the things I've learned, and I think it's an acquired skill, I don't think it's an innate skill, and through the medical journey I've had, is always go in with a written list.
Yes.
You mentioned the intimidation factor and all of that, and you're in an environment you're not familiar with, that you may not be comfortable with. I would just always go on a list because even if I'm comfortable with that medical professional, we have a history and I've felt comfortable. Many times you walk out of there, darn, I meant to ask him that.
Exactly. No, I think it's really important. I think it's very important to learn to be your own advocate, but also have a support network of advocates. I went through an autoimmune disease 30 years ago, but it was a truly interesting adventure. And I learned how important self advocacy is during that. And that was a hard thing because I was ready to be basically the good girl who did what everybody told me to do, but it made no sense to me. And so, why is this happening? And I'm not feeling better. So, something's wrong here.
We share that. We definitely share that because my thought on that was I too went into this as being a good girl, but a few times, as I mentioned, that one doctor experience, it just realized that I, I know me best. I know me better than anybody
Exactly.
else knows me.
You know your own body the best, and you know how you have reacted or not reacted to things. And that stuff is important. Gary and I teach a tool that has 6 styles, but we also teach individuality. And we don't say we're cookie cutters of each other. It's like we have common ways of thinking things through because of our perception, but you're uniquely you because of your life experience. And that is so important to remember when you're dealing in the medical field because they're diagnosing diseases and illnesses and commonalities across people. You sometimes need to fight a little bit to have your unique situation fully understood. If you know the 80-20 rule, if 80% of the time this works, great.
I find it shorthand to get to the base root. And when they gave me a diagnosis, this particular diagnosis made more sense. I'd had multiple diagnoses and I'd go read about them and they was like, oh, maybe. They mentioned to me that with autoimmune, there's a lot of the symptoms are the same. And it's not until you get one odd symptom like a rash or some something else that they can actually put a label on it. That made a lot of sense to me about. They really weren't gaslighting me. It was the 80/20 rule,
It's the
obviously.
80/20 rule. Yeah, or something like that. Or when you think about pharmaceuticals and the reality that things that are approved for use and are valuable for 33 to 36% of the population. That's why there's multiple brands of things and multiple approaches to things because not everybody reacts the same way. I am not a medical professional for a reason.
I'm not a medical professional either. We're making that very clear. Gary's not a medical
Yeah.
professional.
Yeah.
I just love these things to have people think, "Oh, that makes sense," or "I'm gonna try that next time," or,
Exactly.
you know.
Exactly. And it's a tough job to the diagnostics that they go through. It's just that when you're the person it's happening to, you really want 100% firm answer. And that sometimes is very elusive for a while.
And it is, and sometimes I notice it's my own fault. I will have forgotten about something that happened 22 years ago that
I
all of a sudden somebody asks the right question and it becomes relevant.
exactly. But that becomes the you don't know what you don't know. So you can't beat yourself up for it. It's just you learn as you go. Right.
We'll leave it there, Linda Russ. That's fantastic. Share with the audience where to get the book and all about your website, where people can find more about you and Gary's coaching.
Okay, sure. The book is available on Amazon and anybody else that sells ebooks and paperbacks and hardback, but I think only your family members want to buy hardbacks anymore. So it's available there. And our website is yourtalentadvantage.com. So it's www.yourtalentadvantage.com because when you use your strengths, it really is your talent advantage. And you can find out more about perceptual style, more about the theory. There's actually a free assessment you can take to get a guess of what your perceptual style might be. There's also formal assessments that you can take. There's just a lot of information if you want to go looking there and read up about different styles. So we invite everybody to explore it. It's a great tool and we hope they will take advantage of it.
Absolutely. And the book is called Unlock the Power of Your Perception, Claim Your Natural Strengths, Reframe Your Weaknesses, Reshape Your Most Important Relationships. And so that's Linda Ross Vega and Gary Jordan, everyone. Thank you so much for being on the show and sharing this. I find that the more we can learn about ourselves and others, the easier our wellness journey becomes.
I agree 100%. Thank you so much for having us. It's been really fun.
Oh, thank you. I've enjoyed it a lot. Everyone, have a great week. Whatever your adventures, pop over to understandingautoimmune.com to find the other 400 plus episodes, as well as find us on all this Facebook, YouTube, all of that. It's just at Understanding Autoimmune. So you can find us there. Instagram, we're on all of those. And as I said, have a great week. Join us next week for another brand new episode. Enjoy.
The information provided on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and Life Interrupted Radio, including the websites understandingautoimmune.com and lifeinterruptedradio.com, plus social media, is for educational purposes only. What you read, hear, and see on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and Life Interrupted Radio, and its websites, and other media outlets is based on experience only. The information should never be used for any legal, diagnostic, or treatment purposes.